Do you have a story of the teacher that may have impacted you in a positive way? How about one that you remember as holding you back maybe from your true potential? We have the negative stories just like the positive ones. Sometimes the negative ones influence more than the positive ones in our lives. That's what this episode is all about, how we build relationships with our students and how we can influence them to be the best that they can be. And if your students don't like you, they're not going to listen to you. And I can't wait to share with Dr. Ryan Daniel. So put on your thinking cap and let's go. This episode is going to focus on relationships. And with discipline, it's really all about relationships and inclusion and support that we can give to our students. And that's what this podcast, Discipline Win, is all about. How to win in both discipline for ourselves, internally, and when helping others. If you like what you hear in this episode, please consider liking, sharing, and leaving a positive review so that I know how you feel about not only this topic, but the podcast as a whole. So today, thank you so much. Doctor is in the house. Dr. Daniel. This is every time I have another doctor in the room, it's always like doctor. The whole school show your age of, you may not know that one from, what's it from, Airplane or whatever it's from. But Dr. Daniel, Dr. Ryan Daniel, she's an elementary principal in Maryland. She is a fellow on the NAESP Center for Diversity in Leadership. She's an outstanding mom. She's always literally juggling. I feel like you're always literally juggling your kids as well as, she's a great wife and family. You're pulling it all together in your household, I know. And so you're an expert in multitasking. So
I try to
yeah. So where can people follow you on Twitter and that kind of thing?
You can follow me on Twitter at Hey Dr. Daniel. That is Hey, Heydr Daniel. No S. There's no S at the end of my name, but Hey Dr. Daniel.
Nice. And how long have you been a principal now?
I have been a principal for 4 years, entering year 5.
Nice. So what did you do before that?
So before I was an assistant principal and then also worked in central office as a mentor teacher. So really building the capacity and supporting new teachers across the entire school district.
Awesome. And what, before we get into the story today, is what was maybe your, like one of your best experiences you felt like education wise? Like what's been something that stood out?
I think being a mentor teacher, that was awesome because I got to mentor first year brand new teachers where they haven't gotten tainted or jaded. They're still excited about it and across the school district. So it gave me a better scope of our school district because I had 25 new teachers and it also gave me the opportunity to support teachers in different areas of their lives and different capacities. And I think that is what helped me become a great administrator because I came with a coaching background.
Yeah, I love that idea. I'm going to make a note of that, talk about it in a minute here, the whole coaching aspect of things, because I went through sports, my whole life and all that. And that idea of coaching is such a great sort of analogy or example of what we could do in our field, whether it's, supporting students, supporting teachers, because with coaching, and I know audience, we're going to go on a tangent here for a minute, but the coaching component is so clear what the goal is, right? When we're coaching, we're trying to give meaningful, direct, constructive feedback so that individual can get better with whatever they're doing because it aligns to whatever goal we have as a team.
Absolutely.
And so when you were working with your teachers, is that the kind of mindset you had?
That's the kind of mindset. And I am a cheerleading coach too. So I thought about, just having a team of different athletes, but everyone really having to get to this one goal. And so I took that mindset working with the teachers because they were all different. They were all in different schools. They all had different types of leaders. And so really getting them to, finding out like what did a successful teacher look like to them, and then the steps that we needed to take to get there. Because, my perception or definition of what success looks like at the end of the school year could be vastly different than a first year teacher, right? So for me, it was important to find out, like at the end of the school year, what do you want your students to say about you, right? What do you want your students to walk away from after their experience with you for 180 days? And then I took that as our kind of playbook for the school year of how I would support and coach them.
That's good. So that backwards planning and thinking about, what ultimately they want, and, that goal-oriented component of learning. So many times I was just talking about this somebody else this morning about how do we ask students, do we ask teachers what their goals are with what they want to do? So many times we get into things about what we already have listed out. We already have these standards to teach. We already have these goals in schools. We already have these improvement plans. But, those are not really maybe things that people want to do or people value. And then all of a sudden you're forcing something on them that they don't really care about. And, the most important thing for me is if people are engaged in something, then they're learning and growing and getting better. And so a lot of times for me, I don't even care what they're engaged in, frankly, because if they're engaged, that means they're getting better, as opposed to us forcing something they're not engaged in, which means they're not getting better. So that sort of balance on what we, how we kind of work with goals is so important if we're actually asking their feedback. All right, so let's get into it. So one of the reasons I really wanted Ryan to come on because she had shared a story with me a while back about a certain situation with a teacher that was maybe a little bit different. So many times we talk about these motivational teachers that really, inspire us and they uplift us and they help us be better. And I have my own stories that are a little bit different than that too. I have some really good stories, and I have some ones that this is what not to do in teaching. And this is what not to do with students. If you want to send them to the office every day because you can't stand them, let's not do that, because I have stories like that too. And that really resonated with me because so many times we just keep it all like fluffy and positive and like, what they call it now, toxic positivity, I think is the term now. And I think there's a reality in education about, let's talk real, the real work that's happening and what not to do maybe. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that story and kind of how that affected you for the listeners, that we can learn from that.
Absolutely. So I was a 10th grader in high school, and there was a math teacher, and math is not my thing. Well, and it's funny because I became a math teacher, but math was not my thing. And I was having a very difficult time all school year with this one teacher. And I remember going home, and I told my parents that about an incident that we had in class, and she wouldn't give me an opportunity to do the assignment again. And she scheduled a meeting with my parents, and it was before school. And so my parents and my mom and my dad, we all came up there, and she was sitting in their classroom, and she was eating her cereal. And she said, well, I don't have time to meet with y'all right now. And my parents were like, well, you scheduled the meeting. And she's like, well, I don't have time to meet with you. Ryan, she doesn't know what she's doing in my classroom. She's not paying attention. She's not going to, she's probably going to fail the class. And my parents were so livid, right? And I, as still a child, was just broken to pieces, right? Because this was somebody that I've always been taught that, teachers and people that are put in these positions, they are there to support you and to encourage you. And here was someone saying the same things that she said to me when my parents weren't there, and then said it again while my parents were there. And so I eventually was able to get moved out of the classroom. But then fast forward years and years ago, I remember being in Panera Bread, and I saw the teacher. And she was looking at me, and as if she remembered me, and I knew exactly who she was, because you don't forget those teachers. You don't forget those teachers. And I said hi to her, because my parents have taught me to be respectful, right? And so I said hi to her, and she said, "Oh, hey." She's like, "What are you doing with yourself now?" I was like, "Oh, well, I actually just got appointed to be a principal." She's like, "What? I never thought that you would be doing that. I never thought that you would be able to be that." I was like, "Oh." It's like, well, I've been teaching. At that time, I've been teaching for in the county 10 years, and she still worked in the same county. Like, I knew where she was, because again, you don't forget those people. And she said, "Oh, I never thought that you would become anything." And I said, "Well, I'm so glad that I had other teachers that believed in me." And I left, and it was just, I felt so good. I called my mom. I said, "Mom, guess who I just saw?" And but then I just thought about that she was still, here
Oh.
in our school district and still having the same mindset, and it solidified even more my why of why I'm in the same school district that poured into me, because I want to be the counter story to those teachers like she was, right? That that when students left me, that they didn't have those same experiences and that same trauma, because it still triggered me years later. Accomplished, I'm now superseded the hurt position, and it still triggered. It still had an effect on me, and it's just. I again, you said it. We always think about those positive impacts that we've had from teachers, but sometimes those negative ones, they are a big part of our story.
Yeah. First of all, I love that microphone drop moment. You're like, because there's probably like a split second where you have to make a decision right in that moment. Like, what am I going to do right now? And you're like, you know what? I'm doing this.
Yes, I'm doing it. How much out of my character am I going to really let this place take me?
I love it. So there's so much in there. We're gonna dig into. One, there's a great line that I use when I try to talk about this to people, which is Will Smith has a great line, which is if you're not there for my struggles, then don't be there. Don't expect to be there for my successes. And there's so many times teachers in general just be like, oh, since I was a teacher, everyone can give me credit. Well, no, not necessarily. If you're a good teacher, and let's not pretend like every teacher is a good teacher. That is not true whatsoever. We have an enormously high percentage of good teachers, and we have so many millions of great teachers out there. But there's a lot of bad ones too. And our job as leaders is to help find those teachers that are the best and keep them in the building, and find other teachers that are the best and get them in the building, and keep filling our building with the best teachers we possibly can. But that sort of expectation that we can put on students on how we feel of their future is everything. And I think I'm going to speak out of turn. There's some poll or some study I know that has to do with that. Like the probably one of what's it called? Those visible learning with John Hattie. It's probably one of those. He has probably a list of like 500 things now, but one of those is probably like teacher expectation or something. It's probably be a high effect size. But when you look back, you talked about trauma. Can you dig into that a little bit more? Because I think that's a great thing I didn't think about before. You just made me think differently. Is you said that we have trauma for those experiences, and we often get triggered almost by certain things that happen in our lives. But ultimately, how you use that trauma is sort of what makes the difference, right? Because we all have different traumas, and of course there's more significant trauma than others. But in this case, the fact that you still remember it, and it's still in your brain, in the front of your brain, that's significant. So what does that really mean as far as like, how you deal with that? Like as a leader, as a teacher?
I reflected on how many times that trauma hindered me as I matriculated, continued through high school. Like I remember second guessing myself every time I was in a math class. And just not believing that I was capable because somebody that was put in a position to support me told me that I wasn't. And then I realized how much it continued to impact me when I went to college, when I started student teaching. And then when I became a teacher, was very afraid of teaching math. Especially, I then got moved to sixth grade in elementary school. And then I had to teach math and science. And I said, I'm not able to do this because I wasn't good at math. And it took my assistant principal at that time. Well, what makes you think that you weren't good at math? I was like, well, somebody told me I wasn't. So I just, I believed them. I stuck with that. And it took a lot of shifting my mindset of what somebody had put inside of me. And though I had all of these other opportunities where I showed that I was capable of being great at math, it continued to impact me because this was somebody that was put in a position as a teacher to support students and to encourage children that told me that I wasn't good at something and I wouldn't be ever good at it. And those things you don't forget. And so I've tried to use that trauma and recognize the triggers and support other people through it when I see them. So I'm always, when I coach teachers and they're having difficulties with teaching the math standards, or I'm pulling small groups of students in our intervention block and I'm working and I ask to work with math, I'm like, no, you can do this. It's going to be difficult, but you can do this. Like I wasn't great at math either, but I learned how to be great at it. And so I think that sometimes we don't realize how much the trauma impacts us until it shows up in different experiences.
Right. And teachers, if they don't watch out, they make this self-fulfilling prophecy. The thing that they don't want and they keep telling you about it, it becomes the thing that you are. I mean, I remember, in kindergarten, it sounds funny, but in kindergarten, I remember very clearly we went to a parent-teacher, it's an open house kind of thing where all the parents were in line, in a real long line, talking to the teacher. When it was our time to come up, I clearly remember being with my mom and my dad, and right in front of all these other parents, the teacher tells my parents how obnoxious I was. And I mean, I probably was, frankly, I probably still am, but that's not something you say to parents, especially in front of other parents and to the kid. That's such a dumb thing to do. Maybe that teacher doesn't even remember it. Maybe they never even thought about it. Maybe, it came out differently in their mind, whatever. But, how teachers talk to families about kids is so vitally important. As teachers and leaders, we need to talk to teachers more about the words that we say. And something I say in school a lot is that if parents have a perception that you don't care about their kids, they're right. You're not right. They're right. And you may say you want to please parents. Yes, I do. I want parents to feel 100% satisfied with the work that we're doing for their kids, and that we have high expectations for their kids, no matter what they look like, where they come from, how much money they have. That every single one of them we're going to give our heart and soul to, and it's on us, not them, to give that perception to them. Like your teacher gave a very clear perception the other way around, and that's the teacher's fault, not the parents' fault for hearing that. So what are maybe some top 3 things that, teachers need to do to make sure that parents and students both know that you are all in it for that child, that you don't do what this teacher did?
I think the first is to build relationships. I get to know the child beyond the student, right? So getting to know who that child is, who are your students in your classrooms. I think building relationships is the most important part of our work as educators. And I'm a firm believer in, if a student does not like you, they don't listen to you, if they don't feel like that you care about them, that comes off to them. And building the relationships is really important for teachers, to not create that trauma, those triggers for students. But then also I think also with the building relationships is also to build trust with them. So, to get them to understand, listen, there are going to be times that you're going to make mistakes in my classroom, but I need you to trust me that I'm going to support you through those mistakes. So it is okay to get, a bad grade on this assessment. It is okay to struggle with this concept because I'm going to be there to support you through it. But I think in order to build the trust, you got to build the relationship, right? So it's almost like, building a house. Like the foundation has to be set, and I believe the foundation is the relationship building. And then from there, you start building the trust with the student, right? Because now you know them, they know you, right? You're learning their character, they're understanding yours as well, and then now you're building trust with them as you move forward to creating this high educational learning experience for them, right? Because we get 1 year to do this with the students, and it's important for teachers to understand that year can make or break a student, especially in the elementary age, right? Like we set the tone for what they believe school is, right? So building the relationships, building trust, but then also just creating a line of open communication between the students and the parents. I always encourage, especially my teachers that are not parents, to understand that role. And then my teachers that are parents, I ask them all of the time, would you want your child in your classroom? the type of learning experience that you want for your child, how are you going to create that same experience for the students that you are with this school year? And I come always from that with the leadership aspect too. Like, I want my children in the same building, because I can't say that this atmosphere is great for you to bring your child, but I don't think it's good enough for my child, right? I don't think this teacher is strong enough for mine, right? So just really creating that open line of communication between the students and the parents as well.
Awesome advice. I think you're absolutely right. Before I had kids, I thought I was a good teacher. After I had kids, I realized all those things I didn't realize I didn't know. And it's not their fault. If you don't have kids, it doesn't mean you can't be a good teacher without kids. Like, you could totally be an awesome teacher without kids. It just gives you different insight. And that's the one thing about that family dynamic. You know, we put so much shame and blame on parents for things that really are outside their control. It's not their fault. And as a parent, it's like an impossible job. You know, and kudos to you for being a mom and a principal, because I know I'm a dad and a principal, but it's just not the same. The mom responsibility, and, you know, shout out to my wife, Christine, like, what you all have to, oh my gosh, you're saints and superheroes at the same time. So I know you know the real deal when it comes to that. I will start wrapping it up here. Jaime Ganat, which is, I actually have a phrase behind me. So he's a psychologist. What besides this one? There's actually, let me say this one too. This one's good too. This one is, if we treat people as they ought to be, we help them become what they're capable of becoming. What's really interesting is there's a line before this, and this is in the last chapter of my dissertation. And for you listening, I have a poster thing, whatever you want to call it, a sign behind me in my wall in my office. There's the line before that says, if we treat them as they are, we make it worse. We make them worse. Mm-hmm. Meaning that you can't treat a student the way you see them necessarily. You have to treat a student the way that they could be. That positive potential that we see in them is how we should treat them, because that's what they can become. And if we don't do that, we're actually making it worse. Don't treat them as they are. That's not fair to them. Treat them as they can be, as they could be, and you can help them get there. Another quote he has that I really love, which is what reminded me first of all when you were talking, which is, he said that children are like wet cement. Whatever we do makes an impression, you know, and good or bad, what we do, what we say, how we treat them, even our emotional support or lack of support on them makes an enormous difference that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. So that's my shout out to everyone else, is what kind of teacher do you want to be? What kind of leader do you want to be? Do you want to be remembered for something that influences a person to do better because of you or despite you? Right? Like, I don't want someone to do better because they hated me, right? Like, I want some because I inspired them. So that is such great advice. You talked about relationships, trust, open communication. Any last words?
Just the understand that your job, your purpose as an educator is to create a learning experience for your students that they're going to remember, right? And it's just really think about what type of conversations, what type of memories do you want your students to have when they leave your classroom? Because remember, most of the time we only got 1 year to get it right. 1 year. And so just think about the when they walk away from you, when they leave out your classroom, what type of experience do you want them to have with you?
I love that. I'm going to write that word down. And all you listeners, the word is experience. It's not just learning. It's not just academics. What overall experience were they going to remember from you? And, the reality is they probably remember a lot more about how you treated them than about anything that you taught them. And actually what you are teaching them is how you treat them. Those are the things that they actually learn in the long run. So Dr. Daniel at Hey Dr. Daniel. So make sure to follow her, give her a shout out, give her some love. She's an awesome leader, awesome person, awesome mom. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, and all you listeners out there, make sure you use discipline, #DisciplineWin. You can follow me at _AndyJax, Twitter and all that kind of stuff. Go to andyjax.com for some extra free resources that are out there, and we'll do some summaries of the podcast. And remember, what you do makes a difference. Either way, it makes a difference. So make it a good difference. Have a great day, everybody.